what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I'm Connor O'Gara. Will, apparently if I just show up for Florida's games against top 10 teams, they win? Weird. I should just do that. Florida fans, do you want me to just do that all the time for you and just become essentially a Florida fan and just go to all your meaningful home games and keep Billy Napier around forever? Is that what you want?
Yeah, I was going to make a joke that, we've taken in one SEC game each, and we both somehow decided to watch the University of Florida. And I think we both got the exact result that we hoped for, right? I got to watch Florida look hilarious, and you got to watch Florida be awesome and create an awesome storyline. That's going to make like a lot of fun stuff to talk about. So, hey, I'll give you credit, Florida. You're interesting.
I will say, unbiased Big J, was just rooting for the atmosphere to be electric, was hoping that it wouldn't be a scene that cleared out midway through the third quarter. And that is obviously not what we got at all. Was very, very wrong on that game to think that Texas was going to win by double digits. You knew pretty early on, I mean, like midway through the second quarter, that this was not going to be, if Texas was going to win, it was going to take a minor miracle in order for it to happen. But we will recap all of that, all four power conference games that we had. A certain Diego Pavia not exactly having the ending that he practiced in Tuscaloosa. And obviously we will get to Georgia and Kentucky, who played a football game, kind of, sort of, and Mississippi State having a better than it probably looked in the scoreboard type of game at A&M. Before we do all of that, Will, got to talk to you about our friends at Dabble. Guys, been talking about Dabble for a bit now. And if you don't do daily fantasy, and if you're like, hey, I'm not one of these people that has like a fantasy football team, I don't really like doing, like live betting and stuff like that, I just don't keep up with it enough. The DFS space is exactly where you should be going. Dabble is a place that has a really, really great social function. It is second to none. They offer a wide variety of sports making picks, including college football, NFL. We've got NBA that's starting up really, really soon here as well. Use promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that is promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. All right, well, Billy Napier, he's not going down without a fight. That man, say what you will about Billy Napier, when his job is on the line, he is ready to roll. It's a unique skill, and it's not quite the Ed Ogeron, I'm an interim coach energy that Billy Napier has, but maybe in his head, he tells himself he's their interim coach, and his team just looks like a different version of itself when everybody has already poured all the dirt on him. It's a pretty wild thing to consider, and I really am struggling for words to put some context to it.
Funny enough, I don't think you saw this because you were at the game, but I was running the SDS account and I had like a poll that was like, who's the greatest coach in SEC history? Hot seat Billy Napier, opening drive Josh Heupel, interim coach O, or Nick Saban. And of course, people were like, well, it's Nick Saban, of course. It's like, well, no, but here's the joke. It's that these coaches look like Nick Saban in these random moments of their career. And you're like, this is the best team I've ever seen. To the point where obviously Heupel, looked like that against Nick Saban. So it's all about kind of, just like the sports, like down and distance, all about situation on a night that, the atmosphere in the swamp, like you talked about, the common phrase is the swamp will kind of win you one game a year. It feels like we witnessed that in Gainesville.
They beat Texas in every way. In every way, in my opinion. That was the exact type of game that Billy Napier has been waiting to see from his team this year. And don't you know it? His team waited until it was 1-3 to deliver it. Just very, very fitting. Ton of takeaways.
I love the quote too, where he's like, well, this is the team we thought we had in the preseason. And it's like, well, brother, unfortunately, it's like halfway through the season.
Yeah, this is week 6. Not sure if you heard. There's a little bit of hay that's already in the barn. Not sure if all the hay is in the barn, but there's at least some of it. Let's start with the takeaways from the Florida side, Will. Atmosphere, like I said, incredible. I love the Swamp so much. I will, if people leave it off of a short list of best venues in college football, I will argue it. I truly will. Like it is. I love the fact that it's an open air press box too, so you really get the full sense of the place. And even with a team that's off to an awful start like Florida, that place brings it. And it was kind of it's one of those. I feel like every time that I've been there, I guess I've only been there for a game twice. Is that right? I think I've only been there for a game twice, but I've been to the stadium like 3 other times. Yeah, whatever. I feel like it's always a later arriving crowd than I'm expecting. And then I'll look up by the end of the first quarter and it's rocking and it's ready to go. I don't take that for granted. Okay. It is cool walking down through the, like the hallways of that stadium afterwards and hearing the chants of "It's great to be a Florida," and you get the whole place going. They're doing the horns down. Like, never mind the fact that they're 2-3. They're 2-3. Their coach is still probably getting fired. The season has not been what they hoped. DJ Lagway might only have one leg. Like, all these things can exist, and still, that's one of the things I love about college football is that you can just get that on a given Saturday. And I don't say that as if it's just assumed that you should get that. And to me, that was awesome because this was the Bummer Bowl. I know we said in the preview pod we were struggling to come up with names. I thought of a name for it immediately after we signed off. The Bummer Bowl. How could I not think of that?
Mhm.
Obviously.
And true to life, right? It's like Florida fans win and they're excited, but then they're like, "Oh no, what does this mean for us? Are we going to go on a run?"
Yeah, that's exactly. Florida was not a bummer. Okay, I love the way that Lagway came out and played, even though he was clearly hobbled from the jump. Florida didn't allow him to get sacked once, while Arch got sacked 6 times in this
The
one.
trenches for Florida, see, that's the part of the team
Whew.
we talked about in the preview. The trenches for Florida that we expected in the preseason that we liked about this team really showed up against maybe the predominant reigning trenches team in the SEC in Texas.
Agreed. I love that Dallas Wilson in his college debut basically just picked up where he left off from the spring game and instantly gets into the record book in his first career college game. First Florida true freshman ever to catch a touchdown in his debut, and he caught 2. And did he push off on the second one? Texas seemed to think so. Whatever. Even Sark admitted that's a play that if you're a big physical receiver, you can kind of get away with that stuff sometimes, unless, of course, you're Chris Brazzell. I loved that Billy didn't forget that Jaden Baugh existed. Jaden Baugh got 30 touches in this one, Will.
Yes, yes. And we were joking in the preview. I was like, I hope it rains because they're going to run the ball. I think it was you that told me. I think he had like 11 carries in the first quarter. He had heavy
Yeah.
usage. And I saw the opening kind of touchdown. And it's like, wow, it took like, because that's like sometimes how coaches think where it's like, it's a little sloppy out there, but run the ball. And it's like, yeah, your best offensive player we thought was Jaden Baugh. Turns out it might be this pair of freshman wide receivers. Who's to say, really? Everybody looked awesome on Saturday.
Yeah. And Billy, for the first 10 minutes of the second quarter, I think Jaden Baugh only had like 2 carries or something. And I thought, if this is one of those games in which Jaden Baugh ends up with only 16 carries or something, I'm going to be so mad because of how good he's looked. And even Texas afterwards talked about how it wasn't like he was getting these, 12, 13-yard gains or something like that. He would get 3 or 4 yards. And then he falls forward and pushes the pile another 2 or 3, and then you look up, and that's how you get 6, 7 yards per carry. Like that's what Jaden Baugh does, and it's why he's such an effective player. It's why you have to keep feeding him the football. And you saw when it played out like this. This is what it can do, even against a very respected Texas front seven. Will, I love that Florida's banged up defensive line held Texas's running backs, which did not include CJ Baxter, unfortunately, to 9 carries for 11 yards. Troubling for Texas, really good for Florida because this is what we thought we were going to see. And even without Caleb Banks, Ron Roberts, whale of a job being able to
Yep.
game plan for that Texas offense, which needed to be able to run the football. And it was Archer bust. Like that's kind of it. And all of that was great. All of those were non-bummer things, and it should feel good to Florida fans. You should not feel in those moments, this sucks. I hate this. No. I'm telling you, it is perfectly fine to feel good and root for your team and understand that the last time your team walked off that field, it was losing and it lost a game to USF. Okay? So it's good to feel good for a day and feel like, man, it's nice to be able to walk out of here with our heads held high.
It
We
is
had
great to
another
be a Florida
instance.
Gator today. Look at
It
this.
was. It was. You held a Manning in the swamp. That always makes Florida fans happy. Like tale as
Maybe
old
that
as
place is like
time.
their kryptonite too. Maybe it's like they show up and it's like, no, and they just become like average Joes.
Maybe. It certainly felt like it. Like all that is good. Okay. And it's good if you see your team do that regardless of who is at the controls. But the only thing that's a bummer for Florida was thinking that somewhere Scott Strickland is probably watching this game thinking, wait a minute, y'all want me to pay $20 million to fire that guy? That guy? The guy who just gave me that type of performance? You want him gone? That's the pill that you don't want to have to swallow. if you're a Florida fan, of thinking of how good that probably made Scott Strickland feel about his $60 million investment and the guy that everybody has already said, I feel like this is over.
Yeah, and I mean, I started to kind of do a bit on here, like the whole like extend Billy Napier thing, but it's like it's kind of funny, Connor. It's like, when Billy Napier just gets out of the way, this team has some talent. This you talked about Ron Roberts. They have a great coordinator on the defensive side of the ball. It is so frustrating because this is what we've been saying about the Florida Gators for years at this point. Just hand over play calling duties. And again, in a game where their offense looked awesome, it's hard to just have that be the takeaway. But the silver lining is, right, like they got some dudes. Like we just talked about Dallas Wilson. Again, Vernell Brown the third is another dude, super young, super talented. That is a Billy guy that he brought in. And so you look up and down this roster and you see why we like this team. And again, like the yards per completion, like if I go down Florida's average yards like per catch here, it's 18.5, 24, 21, 15. This is exactly what we look to see at a DJ Lagway pushing the ball down the field. He himself had a 10.8 yards per attempt. Like this is the team that Billy Napier thought he had in the offseason, but it always feels like by the time we see that team, we talked about LSU, Ole Miss last year, the horse is already out of the barn, whatever it may be. So if and when Billy Napier does, come back next season, fortunately or
Easy.
unfortunately,
Easy.
well, I mean, it probably takes, I think a lot of it comes down to the Georgia game. I might be getting ahead of myself here kind of in terms of how we're pacing this, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world because your team isn't an untalented team. A lot of people in the SEC, a lot of fans would like to have some of these offensive skill guys. A lot of them would like to be as sound on defense as they have been throughout the year. You know what I'm saying? And so I think it's a lot to be proud of in that you're not a doormat. You do have SEC players, you have people that can compete, and those
Yes.
guys do exist.
And honestly, if you're looking for a silver lining amidst all the things that I just laid out, it's that anybody that's considering this job moving forward, which I'm assuming there will still be a coaching search. Anyone who is considering this job and making up whatever the pros and cons list exists, they will look at a day like Saturday and think, "Man, that guy's had nothing going his way, and it can still show up and do that." Again, it's not to assume that anybody can step in and always beat a top 10 team, which Billy Napier has now beaten a handful of top 10 teams in that building. And like
That's the funniest
there's
part is there are so many SEC teams where you're like, well, if you could just have that signature win. We talked about that with Lane Kiffin for a minute. Like, when are you going to beat a good team? When are you going to beat a top
right.
10 team? Billy already has several of those in his young and disappointing career. That's kind of the funniest thing about this is that he's shown that in the big moments he can be that guy.
Speaking of Lanewell, so I pulled in and drove through like the west side of the stadium by like the media parkings at Flavit Field, and I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that one. Anyway, like you basically drive through like there's I think fraternities, sororities, and stuff like that. And there's a lot of people tailgating on both sides of the street. And there's kind of like a big shoulder because obviously Florida's got the scooters around Gainesville and whatnot, so you need those big lanes. And there's two men standing in the shoulder, and one of them is holding a "Welcome to Lanesville" sign with a photoshopped Lane Kiffin just in all Florida gear, and he's showing it, just trying to get as many honks as possible to people driving by. And that was what set the scene for me going into this game, and it was a reminder of, as much as I see everybody here in blue and orange just looking to have a day, just looking to have a fun Saturday, hopefully humble another Manning, and have this, this memorable day in a season in which there have not been those. There's still that reminder. And I couldn't help but think, I wonder how that guy feels watching this game. He's not throwing away his sign. He's not. Like there's still one afternoon probably doesn't change how you feel about a head coach. Like if Saturday changed your opinion of Billy Napier, I would challenge you to tell me why, because that is entirely different than wanting something to work and hoping that Saturday was the beginning of something. All right. Like I understand that perspective too, but truly changing how you feel about him, I don't know that Saturday did anything. We watched him dig himself out of his grave last year. We talked about that a lot. And that was sandwiched between that is a loss to USF, a 5 interception showing at LSU, and getting leaned on at Miami. That's really what it was. You got leaned on at Miami, who may be the best
Yep.
team in college football. It didn't change the fact that a year 4 coach He's sitting there right now with a 5-15 record away from the swamp. 5-15 away from the swamp. So that's not just true road games. That's neutral site as well. So we're including bowl games, Georgia games, all that stuff. He still believes he's the best play caller in the sport, short and long term. And I thought he'd be much better suited to delegate that. I think we can all agree that at this point. And he still runs a team that has not had November relevance. And that's a problem. And all of that matters, even if Saturday was great. And even if Saturday was the first time since last November, or maybe December bowl game, although that wasn't the best DJ Lagway performance, maybe it's okay to feel like this was the best game that you saw from your team in 10 months, 11 months. Reality is still reality. And I'll hold on to that until I'm told not to.
Yeah, I think kind of the real litmus test here was that timeout that Billy called to get like Austin Barber back in the game.
Could we? Okay, so I need to get your opinion on this. None of it. I asked the Texas media, I asked the Florida media. None of us could figure this out. None of us could figure out this Billy Napier called timeout in the final like 2 minutes of the game, wherein it looks like he just essentially ruined taking 30 seconds off the clock. And when Texas actually had a chance to mount a potential game tying drive at the end, you're thinking to yourself, did Billy Napier just cost himself by accidentally calling this timeout? But it was something related to the substitution with getting a tackle in there, getting a tight end in there, and there was going to be a runoff or something. I couldn't figure. We couldn't get to the bottom of what happened.
Yeah, so basically, like, when your helmet comes off, you can't play the next play, and you could also carry a runoff with it. So he kind of did like a two birds, one stone thing there, where he's like, well, I would just rather have this player and then not have to deal with all that. And so it was funny, like, to your point, though, everybody's takeaway was like, oh, Billy, his Sun Belt Billy, he's blowing this. And then he also, like, and the funny thing is, afterward, I saw several accounts be like, well, he should have articulated it better in the post game. That's not my fault. I didn't know what was going through his head. And it's like, but he did make the right call. Like, let's be honest, because now all these same accounts are coming out being like,
I
"Oh,
think
I
he's
see what he
right.
was doing here."
I do think he ended up being right, and I like even the Texas media, they all kind of agreed in the moment. They were like just baffled that it was happening, and then when it was actually kind of explained, it made sense. But it still would have been one of those things that if Texas had come back, people would have still found a way to use that as a one of these things against Billy. And that's the problem, Will, though, is that any game that Florida loses moving forward, if there are mistakes like that, they get scrutinized that much more. Now, Florida didn't make those mistakes in this game. It was Texas who was making those mistakes. And it was Texas who couldn't even get a punt off without watching it sail through its own end zone. So, like, that's the good
There's
news.
a
But
level
that's
of
still going to
irony
happen.
there where Billy Napier is like out coaching you to the point where your special teams are puking everywhere, and Billy Napier is laughing at your special teams.
Dude, Texas's special teams were rough. They couldn't even down a punt. They had two different times where they should have easily been able to down a punt at the goal line and essentially waste a Florida possession. And still, I mean, they're the one that they even reviewed, which we're reviewing touchbacks. Okay, I guess, sure, why not? But it was Texas did nothing right, nothing right in this game. Will, like, maybe you'll disagree with this. I thought that performance for Texas was so much more alarming than Ohio State. So much more alarming. Competition is part of it for sure. But there was way more across the board for Texas that you could point at and say, uh-oh. Whereas the Ohio State game, I think even in the moment, and I think looking back on it a month later, you could say, all right, maybe Arch faced the best defense in college football, defending national champs in their building. He didn't settle in until it was too late. Nerves got the best of him. All right, whatever. This game, name a battle that Texas won. Was anything? They kicked a field goal? Well, did they?
No, you're so right. And like kind of my takeaway after the Ohio State game was like, well, Texas is going to be fine because even if Arch Manning is like this huge fraud, because like my takeaway, because I'd already seen like the how bad do we get beat by chart where like Texas basically won like from an EPA like win rate standpoint, kind of across the board. And it was like, okay, well, Arch just basically had like his first game, like not first start, but like first real I'm the guy start. And it was away from home in Columbus, got it. So if he just settles out to being bad, not like horrible, Texas is going to be fine. In this game, he didn't play well. He didn't really play mid. He played better than he did against Ohio State, but still not well, I would
mm,
say. But then to your point, across the board, it was like they couldn't run the ball, something they were able to do against Ohio State, a more talented front again on the road. they like it felt like Sark kind of had Arch in like a bubble wrap, and everything around that bubble wrap was working against Ohio State. Whereas against Florida, it was like, no, dude, you need to be part of your own like saving committee here, and you can't do it at this point in your career.
It's a weird watch right now. I'll give Trey Wisner credit for saying afterwards that Texas just didn't play well. Just didn't play well. He had multiple answers in a row saying we just didn't play well. Um, that was different than the approach Michael Taff had of basically chalking that loss up to self-induced errors and leaving touchdowns on the field. And if we just could get out of our own way, buddy, not being able to block and not being able to get off blocks, that's not self-induced errors. That's called losing football.
Yeah, you're just getting beat at that point.
You just got beat. I don't know if Texas is just kind of unfamiliar with that style of game in which they lost in every facet, seemingly. But I was kind of scratching my head listening to the different explanations post game. And obviously, when players have a chance to be able to review film, and by Monday, they could have a different perspective on a game than they do in the heat of the moment on Saturday. So I fully acknowledge that. But man, I thought that it was just really troubling. Like, I understand you could point to a couple of plays that could have changed the complexion of the game. If the DB doesn't fall down on the Dallas Wilson touchdown, which again the Texas sideline wanted a push off, if he doesn't fall down on that, all right, like maybe it changes the game. But that's still a guy playing in his first college game who got positioned on a guy on the outside and then made two guys miss at
I
the
was
end
gonna
of
say
that
he had
play.
several people had a chance to tackle him on that play, even if it was a push off. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it's that close, handle your business and make a play to tackle him or get him out of the end zone. You know what wasn't a self-induced error? Texas getting 0 sacks on a guy playing with one leg.
Dude,
We
that's the
saw
other best
early.
quarterback in SEC history. One leg DJ Lagway. Like when Florida knows they have to protect him and they don't run dumb little option looks with him and use him like he's, Lamar Jackson or something. It's like, wait a minute. If we make him a trebuchet who just has to stand still in the pocket, he can do that. And that's his style that he needs to play is act like you're injured and you're not mobile, honestly.
I'm convinced that if Florida just rolled DJ Lagway out there in a wheelchair, everybody would just turn into Trent Williams on that offensive line.
Paul Pierce, DJ Lagway, getting
Just
better
do
up
it.
to the wheelchair. Yeah.
Just show me that guy can't even walk, and I'll show you a Florida offensive line that basically takes it personally. But respect to Florida, this is also supposed to be an experienced Texas front seven with
It
a
is.
defensive
That's the
coordinator.
thing. They're the same dudes we saw yesterday bully kind of playoff caliber teams.
Sark didn't excuse that, but it was weird to hear him say that they were a bit more in run stop mode than pass rush mode. And maybe Georgia's struggled from that a little bit as well this year. And they've just had more emphasis on being able to stop the run than rush the passer. You've got a quarterback playing on one leg. Okay. If that's your mindset needs to shift. That's the way that this works.
And
I
Florida
was
also
blown
had, in my
away.
opinion, their best rushing performance of the year as well, because at least they
Yeah.
tried and succeeded to run the ball. You could talk about yards per carry, but it didn't matter in the end.
Yeah, Texas got beat, man. Just got beat in every single way, and I thought it was pretty alarming for a second loss, especially coming off the bye. You knew it was going to be hostile, although Ryan Wingo admitted afterward, not gonna lie, it was a little loud. Yeah, man, this ain't TCU. It's not. By now, I would think that they know that. I would think that they've played in some hostile SEC road atmospheres. They have. Their schedule was favorable last year. But this is a reminder. And even Arch said, SEC is no joke. We got to play better. I would say that's an understatement. Texas played with zero urgency. And Sark said there's zero panic with this team. That's fine. They don't have to sit there and panic. Their season is not over in the 12-team playoff era. But I'm worried about this team. Like Texas does not deserve to be in the top 25 right now. They absolutely do not. And we can include getting booed in the third quarter against UTEP if we want, because that's part of this. Nothing will. And in my opinion, I would have disagreed with this take going into this game, but I now feel much more confident saying it. Nothing about Texas looks like a preseason number one team.
Oh yeah, I
Nothing.
mean 100%. They haven't beaten a Power Four team like you said through 5 games, and like they've had time to rest, they've had time to figure it out, and part of that is like maybe I'm too deep into like OU QAnon conspiracy Twitter, but it's actually
Whoa.
kind of It's actually kind of remarkable how Texas has played like injured or first time starter quarterbacks through their time in the SEC. And this is kind of another case where like DJ Lagway was hobbled. And where I'm going with that is like it, even though Texas has had their own injuries and they certainly have, it's almost even the playing field versus giving the other team an advantage with like an established starter who's healthy. Again, Billy Napier, like back against the wall at Gainesville, can kind of offset some of that stuff. But this feels like one of the only times that Texas has truly kind of gotten caught with their hand in the cookie jar as far as we thought we could just roll into town and run over this team. And it didn't go that way for us. And we didn't really prepare for it. So, yeah, to that point, like I said, that, 0 wins against the P4 team, going in Oklahoma or going into the Red River rivalry at the neutral site game. So, like, it's really just hard to feel good about this team at all because even though their schedule is favorable, we're looking at a Mississippi State team that's showed some fight, a Vandy team that's looked angrier than last year. Georgia, like A&M, has gotten better since last year.
They're going to face another backup quarterback. At least that's what Brent Venables expects in Red River, because it looks like John Mateer is not going to be able to give it a go. And you're going to see Michael Hawkins, who you dominated last year, and Texas is a 3.5 point favorite for that one. And they seem to think that Oklahoma is going to be what snaps them out of it. Maybe that'll be the case. Michael Taft was talking about how he's never seen a national championship team without adversity. 2020 Alabama, I guess COVID is the adversity. All right, that's fine. But he started to say, I guess there was like 2019 LSU, but even Texas, gave LSU everything it could handle. And I'm thinking,
Auburn.
yeah, Auburn was actually more of a challenge, probably. I was at that game. What's very, very different about that comp is that you just suffered your second loss of the season. We're in the first weekend of October, and you look like a team that has no idea who you are. And that is a problem. It's one thing to go through in-game adversity. You're not going to beat every team by 45 points. Okay. That wasn't the expectation for Texas going into the season. I argue that Texas deserved to be preseason number one. I also said I think they were going to win a lot of games 24-10. That hasn't been the case. They wish they could win these games 24-10 at this point.
Well, they beat
But
UTEP 27-10. So there you go.
they wish they could beat power conference teams 24-10. Like they're not even at that level yet. And I think if I'm a Texas fan, I'm really panicked. I am really, really panicked. We have not seen a 9-3 at-large team make the 12 team playoff yet. It's only been 1 year of it, but you still have obviously the Oklahoma game coming up. You still have to travel to Georgia, which has owned you more than even Alabama since you joined the SEC or during the Steve Sarkisian era. This team has 8-4 written all over it, Will, unless they have drastic changes.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like too, like, am I wrong to think that like a ton of these quotes are just oozing with arrogance, where it's like, oh, well, yeah,
That was the sense I got, man. It was. Can I? Can I hit one last thing on this though? Because
go ahead.
It's very important, and you're exactly right. I am by no means saying that Arch's career is over or anything like that, or I'm not going to sit here and tell you like this guy's never going to play in the NFL. Like even if he never sniffs an all conference honor, like he still does things even within the course of the game. Like the Ryan Wingo touchdown pass that he had, you're like, okay, I get at least some of the build up, some of the hype, why people freak out about it. Okay, it's starting to get a little weird with some of the arrogance, with some of the insecurity that's coming out. Ryan Wingo was not asked a question about Arch's future, and he had a response to the extent of, he's the reason our team goes. We're behind him 100%. I was like, nobody's talking about a quarterback battle. There was also something I noticed with Sark, and it was why I went to the Texas postgame media stuff instead of Florida's. Postgame press conference, Sark barely gets asked about Arch. If you were just watching that game and, if this is First Take or something like that, or even if this is a big SEC media days type of, crowd, that's the first question. That's the second question. That's the third question.
Brian Kelly's like, where's the media here? Come on, man.
Right? Way different. Way different. And I talked to somebody with Texas media afterwards about this because I noticed, I was like, he got one question about Arch in the first like 7 minutes, and he basically was out there for like 8-9 minutes, whatever it was. It is understood now with Sark that you're either getting a non-answer if you ask about Arch, or you're getting a defensive answer like the what do you look like when you go to the bathroom type thing. And so Texas media has already gotten the hint of he's not going to give us anything. And if we say anything the slightest bit of, oh my gosh, like what did you think of his struggles? he's just going to come back, and Sark is setting such a different type of tone. It's a weird dynamic, and I think rooted in it in some ways is a little bit of Texas arrogance. It's a little bit of Texas arrogance that, in my opinion, comes out more so as insecurity than, oh, we're fine. I know what I'm doing with this quarterback and you don't.
Yeah, I mean, hey, to be clear, this is a two different conference championship game participant, right? With the Big 12 and the SEC didn't win both of them, obviously, but they were able to win the Big 12 a couple of years ago. And I see that they're on the rise. But when you look at the Alabama run, when you look at the Georgia run that you could argue we're still a part of, even one of these quotes would have stuck out to you as far as, okay, yeah, we're going to use a rivalry game to get right. Like, no, growing up, like, no SEC team would ever say, oh yeah, we're kind of struggling right now, but the Iron Bowl, that's our get right game. And it's like, no, bro,
Right?
like you don't say that. It's like same thing here. It's like it's immediately thinking, okay, this is like the coming out party for Arch. He's got it right. Versus like the reasons why we like this team were more about the trench play, the defense, stuff like that. And even like I mean, the throw that he had to that Arch had to Livingston, where I mean,
Heck of a
dictionary
catch, man.
definition hospital ball. I've never seen a hospital ball that bad or the throw where a guy is that wide open where he just like could have snapped that kid in half. And after that, like all Texas accounts are like, yep, see, this could change the game. We're still going. It's like, brother, that might change that guy's spinal structure. Like, I don't know how you're seeing this as just something that is like awesome and you're feeling great about your team. And so, yeah, it's just like this weird feeling of like, again, like we're the champions. Like we have these aspirations. And it's like, bro, like this is not the NFL. Like this is not like a, okay, what's the baseball thing Ole Miss said, shower well, like okay, well you just get up the next day and you get it all off of you and you move on. It's like no, like another loss or two and you're out of this thing. You have all these teams that you really should respect more than you have. And again, like some of this stuff is coming a little bit easier than to a lot of teams for Texas because of some of the recruiting stuff, but also because of the schedule and the backup quarterbacks. And it feels like they're really in for a reality check. I mean, honestly, specifically against an Oklahoma team who's gotten the exact opposite treatment, where like they have had to deal with horrors beyond human comprehension since joining this conference.
Yeah, they're just kind of all over the place. I think Arch is a bit baffled. I think he's a bit shell shocked with all this. Like watching him walk out of that stadium, and I was like, I was like right behind him as he walked out of the press room, and he was getting onto the Texas team bus and whatnot. And there was a couple of Florida fans who like waited for him, and they actually like I thought they were going to heckle him. And they actually kind of gave him a compliment. They're like, "Keep your head up, Arch." Like even as a Florida fan, it's like, all right, like
Florida fan, best fans of the SEC. They'll storm the field there, Cotter. They got pride. Logo hold weight.
this is a St. Louis Cardinal fan move. Best fans in sports. Um,
Hey, you just want to say, son, good game. Good right
yeah,
you ahead of you. All right.
coming from a Cardinal fan.
Coming from yeah.
I think that Arch is realizing this is hard, man. I think he thought he was really ready for this, and he's not. He's not. He's just not seeing it. And there are guys that have been open. There are throws that don't look like they're going to be completed, and then they still kind of end up wobbling their way to be able to get there. And he makes some nice throws over the course of a game, but he doesn't have that sixth sense that you need to be able to have that pocket presence. Like he's getting sacked way too much. He can't really throw on the run at a high enough level for Sark to like roll him out of the pocket and use him effectively in those spots. And that's a problem too. It's
But
just
he
the
has.
Texas
That's
team
what's
has
so weird.
lost.
He's like, what's it called? Like anti Quinn Ewers. Because with Quinn Ewers, it was like, well, he didn't ever really have an NFL body. We talked about it enough, but it's like it was almost like the weird arm angle stuff he was doing made us think he had like this NFL skill set. Whereas like with Arch, it's like to be clear, he does have some zip on the ball. Like you could tell, like some of those deep passes are really pretty. He does have the athleticism. He does have the frame. But then when it all comes together, it just looks like it's like stapled together. And it's like it's so weird to figure out what's wrong with him because he does look like an NFL quarterback. Again, some of the deep throws, but then the stuff he struggles at is so like again, like how are you struggling? So it's just hard to predict how they're going to get him out of this because there's no obvious fix to it.
He even had the weird arm angle. He didn't have as many of those moments in this one, but on that first drive, I think it was where he throws an incomplete pass, and it's just a weird, unnecessary sidearm throw, fling, wherein he's trying not to get the ball batted or whatever. It's like, dude, you're 6'5". You're 6'5". You don't need to
Throw the
be.
ball.
Yeah. Unless you're Matt Stafford, you've played 10 years in the NFL. You're not really at a place yet where you should be trying that out, because I think there's also something too where it looks weird to be able to catch it. And that's the other part of this is even if you're on target, it just is coming in weird. It's just all very disjointed. Texas is a disjointed team right now. First loss to an unranked team since 2022 to Texas Tech. Yeah, wild.
Yeah, a lot of questions to answer for Sark. I don't think this shakes either of our confidence in Steve Sarkisian as far as a game planner. I think it's a
It's
big.
starting to, man.
You
It's
think
starting to.
so?
Yeah, yeah. He can't figure this out. He can't figure it out. And
This is in what?
this offense, this team that has a lot of new pieces, it really hurts when they're struggling as much as they have on the offensive line. That's a big part of it. Last year, if you had an offensive line as good as the one you had last year, I think this would be a different story. But they just don't know who they are week to week. They don't really know what they're going to turn to on third down. Like, it's just a team that is very much in flux. And that inexperience, I thought would show at times. I didn't think it would show this much. And I am starting to wonder too, like, would Sark be better suited in the Josh Heupel Lane Kiffin role of like being you're the CEO of your offense. I get it. You're still, it's still your offense. It's still your baby, but someone in there that's doing the play calls. I'm getting to that point more than I thought I would.
I think this is just a rebuilding year at the end of the day. I mean, I think it's easy to look at the things that we
Preseason
like to.
number one.
I
Like,
correct. But I mean, it's not about what we thought we had. It's what we have in reality. And again, like the defense is what's so shocking to me. But at the end of the day, this is the team that you have. Like I think that if you're at Texas and you've been as basura as you have been the last 20 years, that we can kind of remember since kind of like the national championship against Alabama, like when Colt McCoy went down, that was kind of the end of Texas football as we know it. And to say that our expectation is now playoff every year, like that's fair because they've earned that and they played well. But I do think like even great coaches have down years. So I think that's just what this is. I don't think it, but again, you thought you had one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the SEC inside your building. Like you genuinely believe that. And it turns out you got more of like a top 10 SEC guy and you don't have enough around him or basically once you put out that tape in week 1 against Ohio State of how you're going to work around him, now you can't do those same things again. So that's to put a bow on it.
weird day in Gainesville. Fun day. Was glad I went. Was definitely glad I went. I need to get to Gainesville more often. Florida fans, y'all bring it each and every time, and I absolutely love my time there. All right, Vandy, Alabama. Diego Pavia practiced victory formation. I legitimately laughed out loud when I saw the AL.com video. It was incredible.
That was funny, man. Like again, Bama fans kind of have a little bit of that fun in them, but they're like, well, you can't disrespect Nick Saban Field and Brian. But you got to realize that's what they're doing. That's their thing. It's not you, but they're not you.
For those who don't know what I'm talking about, if you didn't see this, Diego Pavia in warmups, he has his center where he's, like pregame warmups where you just practice on, taking snaps and maybe, what your dropbacks are looking like and whatnot. Diego Pavia practiced the kneel down and then did like a chuck in the air, calls it for himself like it's a fair catch, catches it, and then like daps up his center. He's walking through all of that. And it's
What if
so
I told
funny.
you Diego Pavia should have practiced getting his knee down, but in a very different situation?
Very true. Good point, Will. Good point. Need to get his knee down on that fumble because don't you know it? He did not get to have his victory formation, kneel down, and chuck up into the air. Alabama got its revenge on Diego Pavia. The whole state of Alabama probably feels that way. Even Hugh Freeze probably watching that game somewhere going, nice. All right. Now I can get my revenge too.
That's op number 1 for Hugh Freeze. He's like Osama bin Laden. He's got the wanted He's got the wanted Diego Pavia. Any loss for him is a win for Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, at this point, take what you can, man. Claim that one, make it a national championship for Auburn. I don't care. Let the record show. Bama won this game by 16. And Clark Lee seemed very bummed afterwards that it went from 9 to 16, whether that was because he was hoping the people who backed Vandy would be able to get a nice return on their investment, or if it was simply because going from 9-point single digits to losing that game by 16 looks a lot different. I interpret that how you wish. But Bama, with 6 minutes left, is up 6 points in this game, and it had to return to Refrigerator Perry, Caden Proctor, once again to be able to make a big-time play.
I've never been so happy to be wrong about a player. I'm like, this guy doesn't do anything. He's useless. He's such a big name that doesn't carry it. This guy's getting big-time catches. He's getting big-time carries. I'm so sorry, Caden Proctor.
Here's what's happened here, and it's brilliance. Like this is a Kalen DeBoer thing that would not have happened under Nick Saban, and I'm not saying that makes Kalen DeBoer better. I'm just saying, like, if you're looking at differences between coaches, this is the type of thing that would not have surfaced in this sort of way, where it's happening, like, multiple times, in consecutive weeks like this. And I thought that Caden Proctor was super overrated coming into the year as a pass protector. I think that the lack of run game identity that Alabama had last year as well didn't, to me, scream that anybody on this Alabama offensive line was a world beater. And for him to be getting, preseason top 3 or preseason top 5 pick in the NFL draft, I just kind of looked at that, rolled my eyes, and thought, man, people are just enamored with him because of his physical traits. And he's like, is he actually that good at football? I am now pivoting. I'm still of the belief that as a pass protector, like, he's probably a bit overrated and he's got a ways to go. But people are actually talking about that on the broadcaster. But in terms of is Caden Proctor actually a good football player? Yes, confirmed. These last 2 weeks with these 2 touches, Caden Proctor, great football player. I will never question whether or not he can play football again.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing, and like again, this is just a it's a fun thing they're doing here in Tuscaloosa. And like I'm saying this, it sounds like a troll, but it's not. It's like this has been a fun kind of rivalry with Diego Pavia at least. I don't know if the Vandy part of it's gonna stick around, But these were 2 teams that through 3 quarters, to your point, were like pretty evenly matched. Liked a lot of what I saw out of Vandy. I think that it took kind of some mistakes by Pavia, but Alabama's kind of fun. They're more fun to watch now because you don't know what you're going to get. And people, oh, drill this murder ball, drill this murder ball. Again, looking at the final score, looking at some of the Pavia stuff, you could think that. But I was truly on the edge of my seat for this entire game. And like, say what you will, I'm not calling this a diss, but like Alabama, when they were under Nick Saban, had this feeling of inevitability. And with this, it's more like, I don't know. Will they have a turnover? Will Caden Proctor knock over 3 people for a first down? They go for these 4th downs, dude, that I can feel Nick Saban clinching from whatever box he's in. Like they go for these long 4th downs that are just at these points where like even the nerds are like, "Why are you doing this?" And Caleb's like, "I like my guys. Ray Grubb's here. I'm sipping a cool beverage. I don't care. Let's do it."
Yeah, it's either going to be a really nice completion to Jeremy Bernard or Ryan Williams in space.
The most
Or,
open dude you've ever
yeah,
seen in your life. Like,
you're like, oh, that's a window that I could have thrown into. Or it's going to be Ty Simpson taking a 15-yard loss on a sack or something. Like,
yep.
that's not running the football necessarily, but just doing those things. Yeah. Look, before we get to kind of the Vandy side of this, Kalen DeBoer is now 17-3 against AP top 25 teams as an FBS head coach. It's pretty good. It's
You know what's funny?
pretty
We did
good.
that thing about Dan Lanning where it's like, who would you take over Dan Lanning? And of course, Georgia fans were like, Kirby Smart. And the Bear fans were like, why wouldn't we take Kalen DeBoer for Dan Lanning? He smoked him. And it's
The
like,
head-to-head, yeah.
you got to have a point there, Bama fans. Like, it's hard to pick their guy over your guy at this point because in these big games, he's that guy.
I wouldn't fault Bama fans for saying that. I personally, if I'm just looking at this through a vacuum, not necessarily a one game, who would I want between those 2 coaches, I would still personally give a slight edge to Dan Lanning. I think his floor is higher, but nonetheless, continues to get up for these big time games. And this was a big time game. Okay. Bama fans, you can admit this was a big time game. You needed to avenge the Vandy loss from last year, the embarrassment that you dealt with for the last 12 months, and having this guy come into your building who talked this offseason trash and said to Chris Lowe, like, hey, if we play our game, it won't be close. If you're trying to pretend like that didn't matter, ask yourself why. It's okay that it mattered. This game mattered to Alabama, and it mattered to those players. And for them to be able to walk off that field knowing that they kind of silenced Diego Pavia, that's important. They had the red zone turnovers that they were able to force on him, a fumble, a bad interception, and those were Diego Pavia's undoing. Like, you could look at this performance and say that Alabama figured out some things against him after Vandy got off to a great start. They had it rolling in the first half. The long touchdown Cedric Alexander, where you're thinking, man, Bama's run game defense is still just not where it needs to be. And then quarters 2 through 4, they really put the clamps on. Like, Bama did things in this game. Even, I will say, the throw that Pavia had on 4th and 21 to Stowers, where Stowers, I think a lot of the time he comes down with that ball, and they're still
Yep.
down 9 in that spot, so it's not like Vandy was going to come back and win with a minute and a half left. But Pavia puts it on the money, and he just keeps playing. He just keeps playing. He's going to keep talking. He's going to keep doing his Diego Pavia stuff, and that's perfectly fine. But Bama needed to have this type of day, and it almost weirdly. Actually, I'll hold off on that take. I came away from this feeling like this was a game that mattered to Bama, and with College Game Day in the house, it's okay if this meant more to you than it would have to past Alabama teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like I think you got to be real about where you are, right? Like this is a Bama
Yes,
team that we know lost to FSU week one, and at the time, it felt like a significant thing. And I think that within the context of these seasons, you have to say it is okay. It is not embarrassing. I mean that stadium was rocking. Like to act like okay, we're above this. Like the whole Nick Saban getting mad at fans for leaving in the fourth quarter and stuff. Like that era, it just in college football is over. Even you look at Oregon, Penn State, where it's like it looks like we're under control here, and suddenly we're not, right? And so I think that it's great for us as a viewer, but I think at the same time, like I said, if you're a student, you're getting your money's worth, and I'm not saying that like deceptively or as a troll. I think Ty Simpson, like you gotta like his Heisman odds right now, especially if you're in Tuscaloosa, where he has a big game like this against the Vandy defense that came to play. Talking about 340 yards, two tutties, like he was just like beaming the ball down the field. I think lots of what you like about your team got going. Like Jam Miller had a great game. I think both of your receivers that you like to see, and Horton too had a great game. So I think we're starting to see, like we talked about, like Alabama doesn't have a ton of stars this year, right? And even like Ryan Williams almost got a little bit overrated because of what his role needs to be on the offense. He's more of like that, like elite, hear me out, elite number two, where he's a deep threat guy that can get behind the defense and make an electrifying play versus just again, 10 targets. You heard me say it over and over again. But I think they're really finding their identity. And they're one of the few teams in the SEC that I would say has a true identity. And it really just is everybody's hungry. Everybody eats. We're going to design these looks that spread the ball around. You count this out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different receivers caught a pass in this game. So, yeah, I think that you have to be stoked about this result, even if it is against Vandy.
isn't it wild to look back on Week 1 already? It was only 5 weeks ago. It was only 5 weeks ago. Bama hasn't lost since then. FSU is 0-2 in ACC play. And I'll still not say that it's just going to be smooth sailing for Bama. I don't know if it's going to be smooth sailing for anybody in college football. Really, if we're being honest in this era of the sport, even though I do love the things that Ty Simpson has shown you. I do love the fact that it looks like this defense has taken it personally. I don't think it's going to be a vintage Alabama defense. I still think that they're going to do a lot of things within the course of a game to be able to get stops and make big time plays to make you think, all right, they're not going to be a reason why we can't win an SEC championship. And this is the first time in the DeBoer era that you got a revenge victory. You need to start getting those if you're going to change opinions. Talk about how it matters to beat quality teams on the road. It also matters when there's not someone that just has your number. And for Kalen DeBoer, that's not the only goal this year. But if Clark Lee had a 2-0 record against you, you're wearing that. You're just wearing that in that
Yep.
job. And that's something that the anti-DeBoer crowd is bringing up every single time. They inevitably talk about how you're not going to succeed here and what's your buyout. And you just can't have that hanging over you. It's not the only thing. And we'll wait and see how it plays out with these other revenge games, which Alabama now has a couple more on the schedule. Who knows? Maybe they'll end up getting a revenge game against Michigan. Probably not. But I do think that this is going to be not this game, but this next game is going to be such a great test for, is Alabama really ready to be the cream of the crop in the SEC this year? Because if you go into Mizzou and win what would be your third consecutive top 25 matchup, that's a sign to the rest of the college football world you can go on one of these types of runs in the playoff. That's what you're trying to establish in the regular season in this day and age. And Alabama has the ability to do that. Again, do not think that's going to be a picnic. Alabama, I think, open as like a 4.5 point favorite for that one on the road. But that's all you can ask for. It's all you can ask for after it just couldn't have started worse this year.
Yeah, and I mean, we kind of talked about it, right? Like DeBoer is the exact team, the exact coach that you don't want to see in a 12-team playoff, because his team can kind of get knocked down over the course of the season, lose to FSU, maybe have some of the losses he did last year, end up as a lower seeded team that's either on the road to start off or whatever, and then it's like, or maybe they're hosting, just depending on how it plays out. But it's like, oh no, now we have to play a team who is kind of like Ohio State was last year. That is like the hottest team in America. And speaking of this, like, no disrespect to like Texas A&M, I would just kind of put them over here and say two of the three hottest or teams with the most juice they saw in a row, going to Athens and beating Georgia, a Vanderbilt team that has, succeeded on the road. They got them at home and were able to silence that. And,
And now Mizzou.
again, yeah, now we're on the Mizzou. Again, A&M, I'm going to put them right there, but it kind of that, like, I'm not going to rank them, but of the
No, that's
top
fair.
four, the like three of those four, you're kind of seeing in a row where it's teams that really believe in themselves, teams that are undefeated in SEC play, and so I think you got to love it and just kind of understand, like, FSU's not in the SEC. You're that doesn't really tie in this modern era to your fate.
Yeah, and that's what coaches talk about a lot. Sark talked about it. Like we're 0-1 in SEC play. If you still have a path to get to the SEC championship, then you can still talk about having playoff upside and having national championship upside. And so, from that perspective, yes, that is indeed true. But I do think there is something different with Texas just having the second loss play out the way that it did, whereas Texas would trade places with Alabama in a heartbeat, obviously. Well, I'd rather have the playoff conversation about Vandy than Texas. That was the
100%.
conclusion that I kept coming to. Maybe not a popular thing to do on Saturday as everybody's getting their Diego Pavia shots in and saying, hey, this is why you don't, this is why you don't talk the way that you do. And how dare you, come into this. And, you got Johnny Manziel wearing your jersey on the sideline. You got your mom doing the first down sign. How dare you think that you're at this level? Diego Pavia can do this. He can do this. Let's be clear. Result aside, he's allowed to do what he's doing right now, and I don't necessarily blame him. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree with everything that comes out of his mouth, but he has certainly earned the right to be able to talk that talk.
Did you see him
The
getting in an argument with an Alabama fan on the way out?
Yeah, rougher look for the Alabama fan than
For
Diego
sure.
Pavia.
Yeah.
Really, and for the Vandy staffer who was like, he's a kid. Didn't he? I think the Vandy staffer said like, he's a kid, man.
You're arguing to kids here, which, like, there are kids on the team. I don't know if that's the one you're arguing with, but
You're arguing with a guy who's like 24, 25, a little bit different, but I get the point. Not a good look. Not a good look. Vandy is no ant. Vandy is not an ant. Maybe Alabama's going to end up being a sledgehammer. Maybe. But I still think they do things well. And I still think they're going to win a bunch of games this year. They scheme well. They got after Ty Simpson. They put him in some of these tough spots. They were not scared of that atmosphere at all. This team is not a slouch. It's really not. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to have late November SEC championship type relevance or anything like that. Probably need to get the ball to Cedric Alexander a bit more. I don't know why all of a sudden he wasn't getting the football after he had that long touchdown in the first quarter. But
I can say
this
too, like, I maybe a little bit of disappointment there in Tim Beck, or maybe just great adjustment by Cam Womack. I don't know, or Womack,
yeah,
but they really didn't try to run the ball. And if you think about what has kind of been the issue, and how they were successful the first time, is mobile quarterbacks kind of spreading the defense out, hitting those like unsound like gap lanes, which was not true against Georgia, like we talked about. Well, again, they did struggle on the ground against Georgia. Like, I'm sure Georgia fans are yelling about that, but I felt like when it mattered, they weren't. But yeah, I think that's kind of where they've had issues as run defense, because they want to pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. It did feel like game plan wise, they probably left some points on the board not running the ball.
probably. And it's easy to kind of play the results on that and understand that you'd rather have the ball in Diego Pavia's hands than anybody else in that moment. And so, yeah, I get it. In hindsight, probably didn't exactly play out the way that Vandy had hoped. But as much as I respect this team, they're not a good enough team to overcome 2 red zone turnovers in that atmosphere. You're just not going to be able to do that. Can't leave those types of points on the board.
For sure. And I'll say this really quick, right? I mean, speaking of teams that are all on one page, well communicated, all have an identity. Okay, well, now you're going to play the LSU Tigers, who are about out of sorts as any team in the SEC at home. So I'm already pre scared of that. And I mean, Connor, try to find 2 more losses on this schedule, right? You have home against LSU, home against Mizzou, at Texas, a team that we just talked about has lots of holes, not the Texas team that kind of was able to push you around. I know they did some good things last year in that game, but still able to kind of push Vandy around last year. Those guys are gone. Auburn at home, Kentucky at home, at Tennessee. Like, you kind of have to have some things go wrong for you to not be looking at playoff discussion at least late in the season.
I think they have the ability to maintain playoff relevance. Okay, I do. We're gonna find out a lot with these next two games, LSU and Mizzou, both of which are at home. And if you're able to win one of those, then you will go into November with playoff relevance, having only had two losses to that point. And then who knows what it's going to look like in that game against Texas. You know, if Vandy's
They
a
will
team that's
win
got
one
nothing
of
to lose,
those. I'm here to tell you right now. It would be hard for me to see, if Diego Pavia is healthy, that they go 0-2 against LSU and Mizzou.
we'll see. We'll see. But it should not be considered an automatic win. And for those that were assuming that it was going to be Bama, your next 59-0 type vibes, I think you watch this game play out and realize, Vandy's no joke. They're absolutely not a joke, and they're going to be a really tough out. Not a fun team to play against for 60 minutes, that's for sure.
For sure. And when, Barton Simmons and Clark Lee were putting this roster together, Diego Pavia, Jerry Kill, Tim Beck, it's like this is what you dreamed of.
Yeah.
Being in this position at the SEC, having Alabama consider you not just a peer, but a rival. I mean, because you beat them last year. So congratulations to them. Again, even in a loss, that's what happens when you lose to Alabama. You can look at the positives.
All right, let's talk about the game that had a lot of maroon. Less maroon than we thought. So that's good. Not exactly black on maroon.
Got to update your
Mississippi
graphics,
State
y'all.
white. Yeah, very interesting color palette game. It could have been, and it ended up being just fine. 31-9 was a very misleading score, in my opinion, but A&M fans shouldn't care. Like, I don't think that you should look at that win and say, oh my God, what's wrong with us? We're falling apart. I wouldn't be overly concerned with it being 7-3 late in the third quarter because, as I said coming into this, Mississippi State's defense is good. Okay? It is good. Dare I say, it is looking better than the year two Jeff Lebby offense, which I did not expect that to be the case, which was totally held in check by A&M. Bad backside pressure forced that Blake Shapen interception that really turned around the game. Blake Shapen comes to the sideline, just rips his O-line, rips them. And I was like, that is a guy that's been around football for a long time and is not always that type of guy on the sideline, but he was livid in that moment. And then it turns out being kind of exactly what A&M needed to be able to get things going a little bit. But listen to these drives for the Mississippi State offense and credit the A&M defense, which showed up really, really well, has looked really good to start SEC play so far, and is kind of bounced back after the showing that it had against Notre Dame and South Bend. But listen to these drives for the Mississippi State offense. Okay, to start off, 4 plays, 3 yards, punt. 15 plays, 22 yards, field goal. 15 plays, 22 yards is almost impossible. 3 plays, -1 yard, punt. 3 plays, 3 yards, punt. 5 plays, 29 yards, interception. 3 plays, 0 yards, punt. End of half. 5 plays, 13 yards, punt. 3 plays, 9 yards, punt. That's basically the first 40 minutes of the game. And yet at that point of the game, that's not the entire drive sequence for the entire game, but at that point of the game, Mississippi State still only trailed 7-3. Mississippi State's defense was doing all that it could.
Like, you'll take
And
that. That's the thing. Is like your offense is gonna be bad. You're still in the game, and this does kind of feel like a little bit of like, okay, if you're playing a little bro in NCAA or something, you run up the score at the end, where it's like, no, you're still a little bro. Like, there was some anger being taken out in the fourth quarter of this game because A&M's offense was not able to do what they wanted to, and it was really the fault of Mississippi State's offense. This game wasn't close in the end.
yeah, and this this was just okay. Eventually, they ran out of gas, and there was only going to be so much that they could do. And when A&M has these options that they can turn to in the backfield, and it's like, oh wait, Le'Veon Moss is kind of banged up in this game. Reuben Owens has fresh legs. Let's go send him out there. Oh, we have a mobile quarterback. We can just get him going too. Let's just really push this defense. And then they were able to really do that. It was good to see Reuben Owens get that type of game. I was kind of wondering if he was going to have a moment like that in SEC play, wherein, Le'Veon Moss, they're just trying to make sure that he does not re-injure that knee after the way that A&M's offense crumbled down the stretch without him. And I think that if you are trying to build a team that can withstand the ebbs and flows and at least be like a 10-2 team that gets into the playoff and doesn't pull the Tennessee card of last year and feel like it's just kind of in shambles and showing up in crutches to the playoff, then you need to do things like this. And I credit Mike Elko for kind of recognizing in this game, let's get him out. let's not keep sending him out there. I think at one point, I think Travis Brown tweeted out there was like a direct snap that Le'Veon Moss took in this game. Comes over to the sideline, he's getting sick on the sideline. That's unless you're Cam Scatterbo playing in a playoff game, trying to will your team to a victory. That's a sign that your night should probably be over. If
A little bit. Yeah, and shout out Scatterboo, man. Exactly like, a couple of weird cops here to just hear me out. It's like the guys like Derrick Henry or Zion that they get to the next level. You're like, surely you won't push guys around like this. And then you watch Scatterboo, it's like, this is the same guy. He's out there eating crayons and getting concussions and pushing people over. And I will say really quick to like kind of piggyback off that. It's actually a relevant point I'm gonna make now, so watch out, everyone. We talked about this in the pregame, and I said, hey, this is kind of an ideal situation, which is this is a team that you really shouldn't need everything against, and to get Ruben Owens going, a guy that we liked and you kind of put me on in the preseason, where it's like, hey, exactly what you just said. Okay, Moss gets hurt. What do we do now? It's like we need to have this guy with the trust and the confidence and the pacing of being the guy. And he was able to do this against, to your point, a great Mississippi State defense. And I think on the other side of the ball, man, Torian York. I mean, what a freaking
stud.
guy, man. I mean, I watched something that was kind of like an all 22 angle of his all of his reps against Auburn, and it was funny, man. The way he was able to just like self-destruct Auburn's offense, which like we talked about at the time, not super like impressive to do, but at the same time, it's like the way he individually is one thing that he was doing against Jackson Arnold that was super funny to me was whenever he would come in on a pressure, he would like stick his hand up and wave it, and you could literally see Jackson Arnold losing eye discipline and looking at his hand like a baby with a pair of keys or whatever. And he was like, "Oh, what's he doing with his hand?" And then suddenly Tori York is like in his grill, and I just started keying on him in this game. That dude is everywhere, man.
He's kind of like Edgerrin Cooper a couple years ago, and who now unfortunately has to play for that team in Green Bay. But there are just moments in which you go as an offense. How is that guy always a step ahead of us? He's all the time. And Cassius Howell too. Man, if he's going to keep having those game wrecking type of performances, how much would Georgia pay for a guy like Cassius Howell? Georgia fans, don't get too upset. You won. I'm about to say some nice things about your team in a minute here, but Cassius Howell is getting after offensive lines. And I think there's going to be a whole lot of discussions in SEC offensive meeting rooms about what do we do about those two? Because they are disruptors big time. I don't know that A&M is going to be, I don't know that they're going to be the type of group that is going to play as well as they have in these two SEC games wherein, they've allowed one touchdown apiece in them. But they have stretches in these games where you just feel like you're climbing an uphill battle and there's nothing you can do. That's kind of all you can ask for as a defense.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and we kind of talked about it, but it's like A&M has so many pieces. It's
Yeah.
almost similar to the vibe that we had from Texas, where it's like if things start breaking down, other guys just appear out of the woodwork. And I mean, just one more thing about York, what he reminds me of is like if Harold Perkins could cover, like the guy that it's like, okay, like you actually are a linebacker, like you're a guy that like can read the defense and do all that. And so, yeah, I mean, the sky is truly the limit for A&M. Again, not super stoked about the passing offense, but I mean, think of again. Hate to say it this way, man, but it's like, hey, you know what the Mississippi State team really could have used? Mario Kramer. If they had
Yeah.
that guy, maybe their passing offense would be a little bit different. So, like, you are one of the haves in college football, A&M. But at the end of the day, if your two receivers are maybe the best receiver pairing in an SEC that we talked about, everybody got better at receiver. Even if your quarterback isn't awesome at that, he still has his legs. You still have like 5 rushing threats if you throw in, Terry Bussey and all that. So, I just think this team could come at you in so many different ways. Winning these gritty games is going to help them so much down the stretch.
Got to cut down the penalties. Biggest thing for them. Got to
Their
cut down the
biggest enemies
penalties.
themselves so far, for sure.
Kind of is. Got to cut down the penalties. Need to get off to some faster starts in these games because you don't want to necessarily have, look up and your defense has a bad first quarter or something like that. It's 21-3, and then you just change the identity of who Marcel Reed is. Still, though, to be at this point, to be undefeated, has to feel good. Has to feel really, really good for A&M and feel like they have everything in front of them. And you now have given yourself a runway to be able to figure out some of these things. And that they are correctable. And I kind of trust Mike Elko to be the guy to be able to figure them out.
Yep.
All right. Kentucky, Georgia, last one here. I am old enough to remember when these two teams played in a competitive game. Now, it was also kind of competitive first half of this one for a little bit. But last year, these two teams played in a competitive game, and it made us go, Georgia, You there? Is that you? Y- You're you're still you, right? I, I know that Kentucky maybe could have won this game had Mark Stoops decided to go for it on fourth down, but you're still Georgia, right? Maybe I don't know, but
They certainly got closer to beating Georgia than Texas did
they did, buddy, did they?
in
Yeah,
half as many chances.
yeah. Uh, this game was very, very different this year than it was last year. Good bounce back for Georgia, minus the one sack in the first three quarters when this was, first teamers were out there. Turns out they can actually cover a 3 touchdown spread if it means facing Kentucky at home. So that's the good news for Georgia. Good for Stockton to be able to shake off the bad pick. He gets his legs involved. I thought Joe Tess was going to have a stroke on that one move that he made to get into the end zone. It was the type of play where I had YouTube TV going in my car, wasn't watching, don't worry, not a distracted driver, just listening. It was the type of play that I almost like swerved the car with how much he freaked out. And look, I think we need those moments of Joe Tess sometimes just to wake us up at noon when we're kind of getting into the flow of a college football Saturday. We need these moments. Sometimes it's a little extra to have that at that time of day when I'm just trying to figure out, all right, what noon game is actually worth watching at this point. But Joe
Look,
Tess was fired up.
ABC has created the holy moly version of Joe Test, and when it gets out of the bag, that's their fault at this point, all right? Sometimes you get a little bit extra. No, but I mean, I think that was a really good run. That's the thing. I was kind of
It
blown away
was.
too. So like, I think it's nice. It's a version of the Gus Johnson thing where it's like I'm waking up and now I'm awake and I'm watching college football. But yeah, I'll just say this really quick because I said this to you off air. This is the entirety of my take about this game. Oh my gosh, watching this Kentucky team feels like I'm wasting my time. I'm trying to be nice here, but like man, I was actually kind of rooting for them to make it a competitive game. They get the ball. They have their only kind of good sustained drive, kind of to close the second half with a chance. They're down 2 scores. They have a chance to
Close the second
score.
quarter. Close the second quarter.
No, this was right before like halftime because they were
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to get
yeah.
the ball.
You're saying you said to close the
Oh,
second
you're right. Your
half.
second half. Duh, that would be the
Yeah.
end of the game. Thank you. Yeah, to close the first half or the second quarter, they were going to get the ball back at halftime. They were down 2 scores. And so therefore, if they had scored, gotten the ball back, they would have gotten the ball with a chance to tie the game, despite how this game ended. They were technically in the game. It's just a hilarious management at the end of the game, man. Just a situation where Bully is like trying to change the play at the goal line, and like it's the obvious, not to be like I'm not an offensive guru or anything, but like you want to do something quick where you might even have a chance to run 2 plays. Just get your guys going on a little slant, hope it gets the defense flat footed. Instead, they do something middle of the field, going back in a way that takes forever. And then it's like, okay, well, so I guess we just don't want to score here. We're going to kick a field goal. They miss like the easiest field goal I've ever seen in my life, and the game is over. And I'm just like, why did I invest time watching this game? Like, why? Like, this is exactly kind of how I felt last year with the punt, where it's like you got to this position to where you actually kind of, in a way, and again, Georgia fans, like, they weren't ever really in danger of losing this game, but you felt like they at least had some momentum and had a chance to be a little bit like shaky and mysterious, and they just decided to not do it. And I'm just like, man, okay, let's sim the rest of this one. It was the only SEC game on, so I kind of had to watch the second half, but I wish I didn't.
Kirby pretty much simmed it when Seth McGowan unfortunately left this game. One of his own offensive linemen fell on him. And basically, the drive after that happened, and Georgia gets the ball late in the third quarter. I think they were up 35-7 at that point. Kirby says, okay, Gunnar Stockton, you're out. Ryan Puglisi, you're in. That was Kirby's way of saying, "Oh, Kentucky's most productive offensive player is hurt, and this game is over. We are even going to be able to cover the spread." And I know I've said Florida's offense is the roughest hang in the SEC. I stand corrected. Kentucky's offense without Seth McGowan is the roughest hang in the SEC, and maybe even sometimes with him, if we're being
On a bye
honest.
week, Joe Sloan, you've actually moved down in the SEC OC power rankings because now Florida's ahead of you, but you're still ahead of Kentucky.
Bush Hamden is a distant participant on the SEC coordinator hierarchy. I look, it's a good thing Mark Stoops doubled down on him because I just can't imagine where Kentucky would be if they didn't have coordinator continuity at that spot. My God. Um, let's play a game, Will.
Okay.
It's called Does Mark Stoops Make It to November? Fun game.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, just sim it, man. Like if you're a Kentucky fan or specifically like a booster or a person who like does events for Kentucky, why are you watching right now?
Some might say it's a basketball school. Some might not say that to Mark Stoops, but they'd think it.
Baseball
Kentucky
on the up and up.
baseball on the up and up. Good point. Good point. Volleyball, really good there too. No more road games for Kentucky until November. That's good. But you've got a bye and then home against Texas and then home against Tennessee. It feels like this ends with an ugly Josh Heupel loss. An ugly loss to Josh Heupel, I should say, by the way. In preseason prediction that I had that Tennessee would lose to Kentucky, hand up, Tennessee fans, wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. Going the other way on that one, unless we see drastic changes from Kentucky moving forward. That would feel like a deflating but fitting end to this. And as we've already seen from Mike Gundy play out this year, and maybe we'll see it from James Franklin very soon, you can win a lot of football games and still realize that it's run its course. And this feels like it has run its course. October 26th will be the day that Mark Stoops is fired, and Mitch Barnhart will be able to put the full court press on to get John Summerall. Heard it here first.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it sucks that we're in this situation and that we actually have to have these games play out. But it's like we all kind of know the result. Now, again, last time I said this, Florida beat Texas. So if you're a Kentucky fan, this is the best case scenario because you might just beat some awesome team and maybe Mark Stoops just retires. You just have a great end of your season. So who knows?
It's now been over 2 years since Kentucky beat a power conference team at home. It's a long time, Will. It's a long time.
Yeah.
2 years. You couldn't even grow a mustache 2 years ago.
I don't know if I can do that right now, but you know what? At the end of the day, that just shows we are who we say we are.
Very, very true. All right. That's a pod. Week 6 was, I know it was brief. It was very, very brief. I didn't get any James Franklin jokes in. Should I make one now?
Go ahead.
Okay. It's a good thing that nobody was there to witness him actually crap his pants on that very long trip. You know, in James Franklin's defense, being asked to make a really long trip to win a game in an atmosphere that people are technically there, it's a lot to ask of a team. Even though we just asked Oregon to do it last week when they came into Happy Valley and beat his team, I'm sure everything is fine. I'm sure that Drew Aller is definitely better than Bo Perbula. They didn't choose wrong there. I'm sure that nobody overrated Penn State, even though they were without their best player on the offensive side of the ball and without their best player on the defensive side of the ball. I'm sure that nobody got ahead of themselves with Penn State. What else can I say? Buyout is $50 million. The Iowa notepad is going to be churning this week just to be able to break down some of those numbers. That's really more so for my own entertainment more than anything else. Because you know that I root for people in this sport. I don't root for James Franklin. What else can we say about James Franklin? 0-4 is totally different when it's an interim coach. You know that all too well, Will. Rick Neuheisel. Oh, no, it wasn't Rick Neuheisel. It was his son coaching in this game.
Yeah.
Does that guy get carded when he goes out?
That is the oldest young guy I've ever seen in my life. Like he's simultaneously like 40 and like 15. Like his name's Jerry. You could see mannerisms of his dad in him, but at the same time, he looks like one of the young like Targaryen kids or something.
Yeah, look, I love James Franklin's clock management at the end of the first half. I thought they really had a good idea running the football down 24-7, trying to be able to hold it for like the last touchdown there, and then watching Drew Aller get sacked on 4th down. Look, Nico is a talented quarterback, and Penn State, you know, I think they just ran into a buzzsaw. They just ran into an 0-4 buzzsaw, and who could fault James Franklin for losing a game like that? You know what? Sometimes you just tip your cap. It's the Big Ten. It happens. It happens.
I'm going to say something here that actually might be more disrespectful than anything that you just said, which is that you know what is really just the worst thing about this in my mind? It's that you can't, if you're Penn State, like this is the most stable period in Penn State history. You could talk about the 80s, but they were independent back then. It wasn't this chaotic new 12-team Big Ten era where everybody is like basically just scratching and clawing. After what James Franklin inherited and the success he's had, looking across the aisle to teams like Nebraska when they thought they could do better, I just think you're stuck with him for a lot longer than people want to admit. Because if you look at a team that competes for playoffs every single year and you look at where they were really on the verge of just not being a D1 program when he got there, as far as the scholarships, the inability to protect their quarterback, the scandal, all of that, I really think as an administration, you kind of go, this is where we're at. And that's the worst part of it, is I think this is exactly where they're at, and I don't think they can do better.
Maybe. James Franklin's down so bad right now that I kind of half expect him to give some sort of impassioned rant about how they're still working against Jerry Sandusky related negative recruiting.
Well, that's the part of it too. That's why I love the Pelini comp, is what gets him fired might be said at a microphone. Like, really. It might be between him and boosters. I actually don't even think it'll be on the field, because they're going to just churn through some of these Big Ten teams, finish, I think, with even if they finish with 4 losses, again, where were you when he got here? I just think he might actually end up firing himself at the podium if it happens. That's the funniest part.
The smartest move for Penn State would have been, after James Franklin loses that game against UCLA, you take him into their locker room. You kind of show him, hey, look, this job's not as bad as everybody's saying. You flirted with going to LA before. Could you see yourself here? Do you think this would be a nice place to be? Look, you don't have to travel all the way to UCLA if you just live in Los Angeles. You know how many bathrooms Lincoln Riley has in his house? They could get you that. You've got a lot of money from us. James, why don't you just stay here? The old one of my mentors growing up, Marty Machasik, threw this out there. He's like, they should do the reverse Lane Kiffin with him. Like, don't leave him on the tarmac.
Just gaslight him into staying. He's saying it'll be better for you. Just Penn State, just call every NFL team and be like, where on your staff could you put James Franklin? Like, we'll pay you $10 million right now to just go hire James Franklin.
So James, Jimothy, Miami Dolphins. Miami's awesome. You don't want to deal with Pennsylvania winners anymore. Just go down to Miami, have yourself a time, do the old college to NFL type thing. College, the NIL stuff, it was just a bit much for me. Just do something like that. That's the path for Penn State. Those conversations are being had by people more influential than me. But if you're not having them right now, you're setting yourself up for failure, man. Couldn't have seen this coming. Couldn't have seen that coming. I made Penn State my lock of the week, Will. I made my lock of the week.
That's what we do.
I've had 2 locks of the week that have been like 3 touchdown favorites that have outright lost. Isn't that amazing?
Just ultimately changing the course of football with your lock of the week. It's like, who showed up on this field? This is the team I picked against. That's so funny. I was like, I didn't want to text you because you were at the game. I was like, this is like, you can't make this up, bro.
When my father-in-law is texting me about Penn State, I know it's bad. I know it's really bad. Because my sister-in-law, she's married to a family of Penn State fans. And so they are very locked into all things Penn State. And when he's texting me about it and like he's just using me as an outlet to like make fun of them, I know they're down pretty bad. Yesterday was rough. Really, really rough, Jimothy. Mm-hmm. All right. That's a pod. Glad we got that in, Will. Glad we got that in.
Yeah, if you're a Texas fan, just think to yourself, at least you're not Penn State. Anyway.
This is true. Very, very true. Please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sent Down South, at CJ Guerra, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.